Karoline Leavitt stepped into the showroom inquiring about the luxurious Azure coupe. The salesman, Blake Thompson, glanced her up and down with a sneer, chuckling as he pointed toward the exit. "This isn't the place for MAGA folks like you." Karoline, briefly angered, left with a resolute look. The next morning, a fiery red Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled up in front of the showroom. As the back door opened, Blake froze, his eyes widening in shock. He never expected this to happen. Nicholas Riccio, Karoline's husband, stepped out, ready to confront him. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. Karoline Leavitt, 27, the youngest White House press secretary in history under the Trump administration, walked into the Capital Luxury Motors dealership in Washington, D.C. after a grueling day at the White House. She wore a white button-up shirt, black dress pants, and low heels, polished, professional, yet casual in her Gen Z style. Around her neck, a subtle MAGA necklace quietly signaled her conservative stance. Karoline needed a new car, the Azure coupe as her work vehicle. It wasn't just for getting between press briefings, it was a bold statement against the left-wing media that constantly criticized her and the president. This upscale dealership sat in the heart of D.C., catering to the political elite with gleaming Porsches, Bentleys and Ferraris behind glass. But beneath the glitz was a staff of liberal-leaning management with little love for the MAGA crowd. Karoline strode through the glass doors, her gaze confident, phone in hand, pushing open the entrance to Capital Luxury Motors. A small chime sounded as she stepped inside. The vast space sparkled under LED lights illuminating luxury cars, a fiery red Porsche 911 Turbo, a glossy black Bentley Continental, and a blazing yellow Ferrari SF90 on a display pedestal. The air carried hints of new leather and expensive cologne. She scanned the showroom, her eyes settling on the Azure coupe, a midnight blue masterpiece with sharp lines, priced at $285,000. It was exactly what she needed, a car both powerful and refined, enough to take her from the White House to press briefings. "Hello, ma'am. How can I assist you?" A young voice piped up. Daniel, a new employee around 25, wearing a slightly oversized suit, approached with a timid smile. "I'd like to see that Azure coupe," Karoline replied, her tone calm but firm, pointing at the car. Daniel nodded, starting to say, "It's got a V8 engine, hand-stitched leather interior, perfect for..." But before he could finish, a figure interrupted. "I'll take it from here, Daniel." Blake Thompson, the sales manager, appeared. Around 40, tall and broad, he wore an expensive gray suit, his slicked back hair gleaming, his eyes radiating smugness. A staunch liberal, Blake adjusted his tie, sizing Karoline up from head to toe, not with curiosity, but judgment. "Hello," he said, his voice dripping with fake sweetness. "I'm Blake Thompson, manager here. What are you looking for?" "I want to see the Azure coupe," Karoline repeated, ignoring his stare. Blake smirked, stepping between her and the car. "You sure? This is a limited edition, not just anyone can buy it." His tone carried a hint of mockery. Karoline frowned slightly. "I know what it is. I want to see the interior." Blake crossed his arms, scoffing. "You look familiar. Hold on." He tilted his head, then his eyes lit up as if he'd pieced it together. "Oh, I remember now. You're Karoline Leavitt, right? Trump's press secretary." He emphasized Trump like it was a curse, his voice rising, drawing glances from nearby customers. Karoline nodded, her expression unchanged. "That's right. I need this car for work." Blake laughed, the harsh sound echoing through the showroom. "Work? You mean running to press briefings to defend outdated policies? I thought you were just good at talking tariffs and border walls, didn't peg you for dreaming of luxury cars." He turned to Daniel, winking. "Hear that? MAGA knows how to play fancy too." Daniel lowered his head, visibly uneasy but silent. Karoline stood tall, her voice still steady. "I'm not dreaming. I want to buy it today. Can you show me the car?" Blake stopped laughing, but the smirk lingered. He stepped closer, leaning down like he was talking to a child. "Listen, Miss Leavitt, I don't know where you get your money. Probably MAGA donations, right? But this is Capital Luxury Motors. We serve clients with taste, with social awareness, not showy conservatives." "Social awareness?" Karoline echoed, her tone sharpening slightly. "You mean refusing customers based on politics? I need a car to do my job efficiently, Not to please you or anyone else. Blake shrugged, unfazed. Efficiently? With Trump? I don't think this car fits your image. What are you gonna polish his brand with it? Karoline clenched her fists but maintained her trademark calm from facing down leftist reporters. You don't need to care what I use it for. I'm a customer, I have money, and I want to see the car. That's it. Blake stepped back, eyeing her like she'd said something absurd. Money? You're serious coming in here with that outfit and that cheap necklace? Who do you think you are to demand an Azure coupe? Whispers spread. A couple near the Ferrari turned to look. Two other salespeople murmured, one chuckling. Daniel stood still, eyes on the floor, clearly wishing to vanish. Blake crossed his arms, his gaze daring her. Look, Miss Leavitt, I don't have time for MAGA stunts. If you want a car, book an appointment like a normal person. Otherwise, I suggest you try somewhere else. Tesla, maybe, better for the environment. Karoline met his eyes, her voice low but firm. I don't need your suggestions. I want this car. Blake Thompson stood before Karoline Leavitt, his gaze icy, arms crossed tightly, as if guarding his turf in the Capitol Luxury Motors showroom. Whispers from customers and staff rippled through, blending with the soft background music from ceiling speakers. The midnight blue Azure coupe still gleamed silently on its pedestal, but the air around it now felt heavy. Don't you get it? This is my turf. And I say no, Blake repeated, his voice dropping, no longer hiding his contempt. Karoline, in her white shirt and black pants, stood firm, unshaken, her eyes as sharp as when she faced leftist reporters at the White House. Your turf? She replied, her tone calm but weighty, honed from sparring on national TV. I thought this was a dealership, not a political club. I have money, I want to buy the Azure coupe. What's your reason for refusing me? Blake gave a short, dry laugh, the sound sharp like a slap. Reason? You're seriously asking that? Look at you, that cheap MAGA necklace, that attitude like you own the world. You're Trump's people, and we don't welcome your kind here. Karoline furrowed her brow, but stayed composed. My money's as good as anyone's in this showroom. You can't refuse me just because you don't like Trump. Blake stepped closer, leaning down until his face was level with hers, his breath tinged with bitter coffee. Oh, I can, Miss Leavitt. This is a private business. I decide who gets served. And I don't want dirty MAGA money tainting this place. The whispers in the showroom grew louder. A middle-aged man in a blue suit near the Bentley murmured to his wife, "Who is she?" His wife replied, "Trump's press secretary. I've seen her on TV." Another salesperson, with dyed blonde hair, giggled, whispering to a colleague, "Blake's teaching her a lesson." Daniel, the young employee, stood a few steps away, clutching a brochure, his face flushed with embarrassment but too afraid to intervene. Karoline took a deep breath, her voice hardening. "Dirty money? You're talking about what I earn from my job, representing millions of Americans. By not serving me, you're insulting them." Blake shrugged, turning to the small crowd gathering. "Listen up, everyone," he boomed, his voice carrying across the showroom like an actor on stage. "Miss Leavitt here wants to use MAGA money to buy our cars. I bet she'd slap a Trump flag on it and parade around D.C. Do we need customers like that?" A few laughs erupted from the corner. The man near the Bentley nodded, his wife covering her mouth as she giggled, but not everyone agreed. An older woman in a gray sweater frowned. "She just wants to buy a car. What's wrong with that?" Blake ignored her, turning back to Karoline, pointing at the glass doors. "You heard them. This isn't your place. I don't care if you're press secretary or whatever. Get out now." Karoline didn't budge. "I'm a customer, not a troublemaker. You have no legal grounds to kick me out." Blake stepped closer, so near she could see the creases on his forehead. "Grounds? I don't like you. That's enough. This is my turf, and I say you don't belong. Leave, or I'll call security." He pointed harder at the door, his voice rising, brimming with defiance. The crowd fell silent, all eyes on Karoline. She looked at Blake, then around the showroom, curious faces, some smirking, others uneasy. She knew she could call a lawyer, turn this into a lawsuit, but not now. "Fine," she said, her voice low but clear, ringing like a warning. "You want me gone, I'll go. But this isn't over." She turned, heading for the glass doors, her heels clicking steadily on the marble floor. Blake laughed loudly behind her. "Say hi to Trump for me, get an electric car, it's more modern." A few more laughs followed, but Daniel bowed his head, muttering, "This isn't right." As Karoline pushed the door, sunlight streamed in, highlighting her small but steadfast silhouette. Her hand gripped her phone, lips pressed into a tight line. Blake thought he'd won, that he'd just schooled the MAGA crowd, but he didn't know Karoline wasn't leaving defeated. She was leaving with a plan. The glass door shut behind her, the small chime ringing again, like a period on the drama that just unfolded. But it wasn't the end. The showroom buzzed with whispers, Blake strutting back to his work. Karoline Leavitt pushed open the door of her old sedan, a silver Toyota Camry with faded paint, and slid into the driver's seat. The late afternoon sun dimmed outside, Capital Luxury Motors, but inside her, a quiet fire smoldered. Her hands gripped the steering wheel, eyes fixed through the windshield, still hearing Blake Thompson's mocking laugh. "Get an electric car, it's more modern." She took a deep breath, pulled her phone from her black dress pants, opened her contacts, and dialed. The line rang twice before a deep, slightly raspy voice answered. "Karoline. You okay?" "Nicholas," she said, her voice low but steady. "I just got kicked out of a dealership in D.C. On the other end, Nicholas Riccio, her husband, went quiet for a second. She pictured him in his home office, salt and pepper hair slightly mussed, dark brown eyes narrowing. Nicholas, 59, once homeless before building Riccio Enterprises LLC into a multi-million-dollar real estate empire in New England. Wasn't quick to anger, but when it came to Karoline, he reacted fiercely. "Kicked out? Who dared do that to you?" he asked, his voice dropping, edged with fury. Karoline started the car, the engine humming faintly as she pulled out of the lot. "The manager, Blake Thompson. He recognized me as Trump's press secretary, refused to sell me a car because I'm MAGA, called my money dirty, said I didn't belong there." She recounted it, her tone calm but tinged with frustration. "I wanted the Azure coupe for work, to get between the White House and briefings, to do my job. But he humiliated me in front of the whole showroom." Nicholas exhaled sharply through the phone, the sound like wind rushing through the receiver. "What did he say?" Karoline repeated Blake's words, from the jabs about Trump to the final challenge. "Get out, or I'll call security." She stopped at a red light, fingers tapping the wheel. I pushed back, said my money's as good as anyone's, but he didn't care. He used private business rights to kick me out, mocked the president too. "Bastard," Nicholas muttered, his voice now unmistakably angry. Karoline heard the creak of a leather chair. He'd probably stood up, pacing their suburban D.C. home office. She smiled faintly, knowing her husband well. Nicholas wasn't just a successful real estate mogul. He'd clawed his way up from nothing, sleeping on park benches in Hampton Beach before owning millions in property. He'd proposed to her, and just months after their son, Nicholas Nico, Robert, was born, he'd sworn to protect his family at all costs. "Who does he think he is, insulting you like that?" Nicholas said, his voice rising. "You're the White House press secretary, representing the president, and he calls your money dirty. Does he know how hard you work?" Karoline merged onto the highway, city lights flickering in the distance. "He doesn't care, Nicholas. To him I'm everything he hates. Trump, MAGA, all of it. He wanted to humiliate me to prove he's superior." Nicholas went quiet for a moment, then asked, "What do you want me to do?" Karoline pursed her lips, weighing her options. She could turn it into a lawsuit, feed it to conservative media, or let it go. But she wasn't the type to let go. "I don't want revenge," she said slowly, "but I want him to see his mistake. He thinks I'm weak because I'm a young woman, a Trump supporter. I want him to realize his liberalism doesn't give him the right to trample people." Nicholas chuckled, a low, meaningful sound. "All right, I know what to do." Karoline frowned. "What do you mean?" "Just head home," he replied, his tone firm. "Tomorrow I'll go there. He won't forget that day." Karoline heard him walking, maybe to the garage where the Rolls-Royce Phantom, worth $1.5 million, a deep red reminiscent of MAGA, sat waiting. "Nicholas, don't overdo it," she warned, though she knew he rarely listened when riled up. "Overdo it," he repeated, his tone tinged with mischief. "I just want to show him how wrong he was to mess with my wife. You're Karoline Leavitt, no one gets to disrespect you." Karoline let out a soft laugh, her first since leaving the dealership. All right, but I want to hear all the details later. Don't worry, Nicholas said. I'll tell you everything. Now go home, Nico's waiting for you. Karoline Leavitt drove her old silver Toyota Camry home, its headlights sweeping across DC's suburban streets. The faint hum of the engine mixed with her thoughts about the call with Nicholas Riccio, her husband. Tomorrow I'll go there. He won't forget that day, he'd said, his voice brimming with resolve. Karoline smiled faintly, her hand brushing the MAGA necklace, though she still weighed her feelings. Blake Thompson had humiliated her in front of the entire Capital Luxury Motors showroom, not just because she was Trump's press secretary, but because he thought she didn't belong. Nicholas wanted to strike back, and she knew he wasn't kidding. She turned onto the road leading to their two-story suburban home, a discreet villa, far less flashy than the multi-million-dollar properties Nicholas owned in New Hampshire. As the car parked in the garage, the living room light glowed through the curtains. Karoline stepped inside, kicked off her heels, and saw Nicholas sitting in a leather chair in the small office, a glass of whiskey in hand, eyes glued to his phone. He wore a simple gray shirt, his salt and pepper hair slightly mussed, signs of a day working on Riccio Enterprises LLC. Scattered blueprints of real estate projects littered the desk, but he looked up the moment he heard her. "You're back," Nicholas said, standing, his deep brown eyes flashing with concern mixed with anger. Tall and broad at 59, he still carried the rugged frame from his struggling days in Hampton Beach. "Nico's asleep upstairs. You okay?" Karoline nodded, sinking into the sofa across from him. "I'm fine, but I'm still thinking about the dealership. Blake didn't just refuse to sell me a car, he wanted to humiliate me to prove his liberal ideals were superior." Nicholas gripped his glass tighter, his knuckles whitening. "He thinks he's nobler than you just because he hates Trump." He set the glass on the table, his voice dropping. "I'm not letting this slide easily." Karoline tilted her head. "I told you I don't want revenge. I want him to see his mistake, not be ruined." Nicholas chuckled, that familiar mischievous smile she'd known since he proposed in New Hampshire. "I'm not buying the dealership to fire him, though I could, but I'll make him remember tomorrow." He stepped to the office door, waving her to follow. "Come here, I'll show you what I'm using." Karoline stood, trailing him through the dim hallway to the spacious garage out back. The garage lights flicked on, revealing the Rolls-Royce Phantom, a $1.5 million beast painted a deep red reminiscent of the MAGA flag, with bespoke beige leather interior and gleaming chrome wheels. Nicholas patted the hood, his voice proud. "I had it custom made last year after Nico was born. Tomorrow I'm driving it to Capital Luxury Motors. He'll see what he rejected isn't a joke." Karoline eyed the car, then her husband, a flicker of worry in her gaze. "Nicholas, what are you planning? Don't turn this into a flex." He shook his head, stepping closer and placing a hand on her shoulder. "Not a flex. I'll go there, buy the Azure coupe you wanted, and let him know he was wrong to disrespect you. He thinks you don't belong in his world. I'll show him we're beyond his little bubble." Karoline pressed her lips together, thinking, "But if you just buy the car, he'll think he won, that our money doesn't change his mindset." Nicholas smirked, a spark lighting his eyes. "Not just the car, I'll invite him to a MAGA event, the Veterans Fundraiser Gala you're hosting next month. He'll have to face the people he despises, see their real worth. That's how I'll teach him, not with fists." Karoline laughed, feeling lighter for the first time that day. "You're smarter than I give you credit for. I have to be to keep up with you," Nicholas replied, pulling her into his arms. He lowered his voice. "He messed with the wrong person, Karoline. I had nothing once, slept on park benches, but I learned a person's worth isn't their looks or beliefs. He needs to learn that, and I'll be the one to teach him." She nodded, leaning into him for a moment, then asked, "You sure?" "Absolutely," he said, letting her go and stepping to open the car door. "Tomorrow, 10 a.m., I'll be there. You don't need to come, let me handle it. But you'll love hearing how it goes." Karoline looked at him, then at the blazing red car under the garage lights. "All right, I want the full details." Nicholas nodded, his smile returning. Bright morning sunlight poured over Washington, D.C., glinting off the glass walls of Capital Luxury Motors. A deep, powerful rumble echoed as the deep red Rolls-Royce Phantom, worth $1.5 million, rolled slowly up to the dealership's entrance. A small crowd gathered near the door, some holding phones to record, whispering, "What a car, must be someone big." Inside the showroom, Blake Thompson stood by the Bentley Continental, adjusting his gray tie, chatting with a wealthy client. Still smug from kicking Karoline Leavitt out yesterday, he thought he'd taught the MAGA crowd a lesson. The Rolls-Royce door opened, and Nicholas Riccio stepped out. At 59, tall and imposing, he wore a fitted dark gray suit, his salt and pepper hair neat, his sharp gaze that of a man who'd built a real estate empire from nothing. The fiery red car behind him wasn't just transport, it was a statement, echoing the MAGA flag he and Karoline cherished. Nicholas shut the door, strode through the dealership's glass entrance, the small chime ringing, though it was drowned by the sudden hush inside the showroom. Blake turned, his smile freezing as he saw Nicholas. Customers and staff stopped talking, eyes locked on the man who'd just entered. Daniel, the young employee, stood near the reception desk, whispering to a colleague, "Who's that? That car's no joke." Blake cleared his throat, trying to hold his confidence, stepping forward to block Nicholas. "Hello, sir. I'm Blake Thompson, sales manager. What can I do for you today?" His voice was smooth, but his eyes flickered with unease as they darted to the Rolls-Royce outside. Nicholas stopped, sizing Blake up from head to toe, his gaze calm but icy. "I'm Nicholas Riccio," he said, his deep voice carrying through the showroom, "Karoline Leavitt's husband. Yesterday you refused to sell her a car because she's with Trump. I'm here to talk about that." Blake blinked, his mouth opening then closing, as if his brain short-circuited. Whispers rippled through the crowd. The man near the Bentley muttered, "The press secretary's husband." His wife nodded. "Probably a real tycoon." Blake regained his composure, forcing a crooked smile. "Mr. Riccio, I'm afraid there's a misunderstanding. We didn't refuse anyone, it was just..." Nicholas cut him off, his voice sharp as a blade. "Don't lie. You called her money dirty, said she didn't belong, and kicked her out in front of everyone. I'm not here for excuses. I'm here to buy the Azure coupe she wanted." He pointed at the midnight blue car on the pedestal, eyes never leaving Blake. Blake swallowed hard, his hand tightening on his tie. "The Azure coupe? Yes, of course, we can." He stopped, realizing he sounded too eager. "But I have to ask, are you serious about buying it today? It's a limited edition, not just anyone." Nicholas interrupted again, stepping closer, towering over Blake. "I'm not asking your opinion. I said I want to buy it. My wife needs it for work, press briefings, White House events. You refused her because you hate Trump, but you don't know who she is or who I am." Richard Mason, the dealership owner, emerged from the back office, drawn by the commotion. Around 50, in a navy suit with silver hair slicked back, he looked anxious. "Hello, I'm Richard Mason, the owner here. Is there a problem?" Nicholas turned, his tone unchanged. "The problem is your manager insulted my wife Karoline Leavitt, White House press secretary. He refused to sell her a car over politics, humiliated her in front of customers. I'm here to fix that." Blake stammered, trying to jump in. "Mr. Riccio, I didn't mean to offend. We just prioritize socially conscious clients." Nicholas spun back, his glare piercing. "Socially conscious? You think kicking out a woman, who represents millions of Americans, is noble? You know nothing about her. Karoline worked with Trump from an internship, ran for Congress, and now she's the youngest press secretary ever. And you, just a car salesman playing judge." Richard raised a hand, trying to calm things. "Mr. Riccio, I apologize for this misunderstanding. We don't want to lose customers. You want the Azure, I'll handle it personally." Nicholas nodded, but his eyes stayed cold. "Good, I want the paperwork done today. But I'm not finished with him." He pointed at Blake, now pale. "You thought you won by kicking her out. You'll see the consequences." Blake stepped back, his voice shaky. "Consequences? What are you going to do?" Nicholas smirked, a smile devoid of warmth. "I'm not ruining you, but you'll learn your liberalism doesn't give you the right to disrespect people." He turned to Richard. "Get the car ready. I'll tell him what he's doing next." The Capital Luxury Motors showroom fell silent. save for Blake Thompson's ragged breathing cutting through the luxurious space. Nicholas Riccio stood tall in his gray suit, his sharp gaze locked on Blake, who'd just gone pale at the words, "You'll see the consequences." The deep red Rolls-Royce Phantom outside the glass doors still drew stares from the crowd, but inside all focus was on the standoff. Richard Mason, the owner, wiped sweat from his brow with his navy suit sleeve, trying to keep his voice steady. "Riccio, we'll get the Azure sorted right away. I'm so sorry about yesterday with Miss Leavitt." Nicholas nodded, eyes fixed on Blake. "Good, I want the paperwork done today. My wife needs the car for work, press briefings, White House events. She doesn't have time for petty ideological games." He stepped toward the midnight blue Azure coupe on the pedestal, running a hand along its hood, then turned back to Blake. "But I'm not just here to buy a car. You insulted her, and I'm not letting that slide easily." Richard raised a hand, cutting in Mr. "Riccio, I assure you this won't happen again." Blake was just, but Nicholas interrupted, facing him. "Don't defend him. He called her money dirty, kicked her out like a troublemaker. I had nothing once, slept on park benches, but I never judged people for their beliefs." He did. Blake took a step back, his eyes darting between Nicholas and Richard, but his mouth still tried. "I have the right to choose customers." "Right?" Nicholas let out a dry laugh, the sound bouncing through the showroom. "Your right ends when you use it to humiliate others. You think you're better than her because you're progressive. You know nothing about her, from Trump intern to congressional candidate, now the youngest press secretary ever. And you, a car salesman who thinks he can decide who's worthy." The crowd was dead silent. Daniel, the young employee near the desk, eyes wide, whispered to a colleague, "He's right." Blake flushed, his voice trembling. "You don't get it, we don't want MAGA ties." Nicholas cut him off again, his stare piercing. "Don't want? Then why are you still here when I roll up in a Rolls-Royce? You think I'm not socially conscious as enough to buy your cars?" He pointed outside, where the red beast gleamed in the sun. "I built Riccio Enterprises from scratch, own property across New England. My wife and I don't need to prove anything to you, but you'll learn a lesson today." Richard hurried forward, his voice pleading, "Mr. Riccio, I apologize on Blake's behalf. We'll sell the Azure at the best price, no extra fees." Nicholas raised a hand, stopping him. "I'll buy it, but not to make him happy. I'm buying it because Karoline needs it. Where's the paperwork?" Richard nodded rapidly, gesturing to Daniel, "Get the papers." Daniel rushed off, while Blake stood frozen, hands clenched, unsure what to do. Nicholas turned back to Blake, his voice low but firm. "I could buy this dealership and fire you today, but I won't. Instead, you'll attend the Veterans Fundraiser Gala Karoline's hosting next month. You'll volunteer, meet the people you despise, see their real worth. That's how you'll learn respect again." Blake blinked, stammering, "Volunteer?" "I don't." "You will," Nicholas cut in, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Or I'll make sure no customer wants to deal with you again. Your choice." Blake fell silent, his face pale, eyes dropping to the floor. Richard interjected, "Blake will do it, I guarantee." "Daniel, where's the paperwork?" Daniel ran up, holding a stack of documents, handing them to Nicholas. He reviewed them, nodded. "Good. I want the car delivered to Karoline within 24 hours. Nicholas signed the papers swiftly, handed them back to Daniel, then gave Blake one last look. "You thought you won by kicking her out? You were wrong. Your liberalism doesn't make you better than anyone." He turned to Richard. "All done?" Richard nodded. "Yes, sir. The car will be delivered on time." Nicholas nodded, walking to the glass doors, his shoes clicking steadily on the marble floor. Blake stood there, hands trembling, watching Nicholas and the Rolls-Royce outside. Customers whispered among themselves, some nodding in approval, others shaking their heads at Blake. His smug pride had crumbled in mere minutes. A month after the incident at Capital Luxury Motors, the Grand Hyatt Hotel in Washington, D.C., glowed brightly for the Veterans Fundraiser Gala, hosted by Karoline Leavitt. The Grand Hall was adorned with American flags and MAGA banners, filled with hundreds, veterans, their families, and conservative donors, mingling amid lively chatter. Tables brimmed with food, a band played patriotic tunes, and the air buzzed with pride. Karoline, in an elegant navy business dress, stood near the stage, microphone in hand, chatting with a group of former servicemen. Her subtle MAGA necklace glinted under the lights, her eyes shining as she thanked them for their service. Near the entrance, Blake Thompson appeared, no longer in his pricey gray suit, but a simple black polo with a volunteer badge. He pushed a wheelchair for a young veteran, Tom, about 30, who'd lost a leg in combat. Blake leaned down, listening as Tom directed him to the buffet, his voice soft. "All right, I'll grab you some water." His face lacked the smugness of a month ago. Now it held quiet, even a hint of awkwardness. Nicholas Riccio had forced him into this gala, and after weeks working with those he once scorned, Blake was starting to shift. Karoline stepped off the stage, her eyes catching Blake from afar. She smiled faintly, walking toward him, her heels tapping evenly on the wooden floor. "Blake," she called, her tone calm but laced with subtle humor. "I didn't expect you to actually show up." Blake looked up, pausing the wheelchair, his face briefly flushing. "Leavitt," he said, voice low. "Your husband didn't give me much choice. He said if I didn't, I'd have no customers left." She nodded, glancing at Tom, who smiled at her. "Thanks for being here today, Tom," she said, then turned back to Blake. "So how's it feel? Working with these people, is it what you thought?" Blake paused, eyes dropping to the floor, then sighed. "No," he admitted. "I used to think MAGA was all showy, clueless types, but after a few weeks here, meeting people like Tom, I was wrong. They're not the enemy I imagined." Karoline crossed her arms, her gaze sharp but not harsh. "You were wrong to judge me by my politics, Blake. You called my money dirty, kicked me out of the dealership, because I'm with Trump, but a person's worth isn't in their politics, it's in how they treat others." Blake nodded slowly, his voice quieter. "I know, I apologized to Mr. Riccio when the car was delivered, but now I want to say it to you directly. I was wrong, Miss Leavitt. There's no excuse for how I treated you." She smiled faintly, for once without a trace of sarcasm. "No need for excuses, just that you've learned something." "That's enough," Tom chimed in, cheerful. "Blake's not bad, Miss Leavitt. He helped me shoot hoops yesterday, still pretty clumsy though." Blake laughed, his first since arriving at the gala, his eyes brightening. "I'm learning, Tom. You're a tough coach." Nicholas Riccio emerged from behind, tall in a black suit, hands casually in his pockets. He placed a hand on Karoline's shoulder, looking at Blake with eyes no longer as cold as they'd been at the dealership. "Seeing him work here, I've got to admit he's trying," he said to his wife, then turned to Blake. "So, is this gala what you thought MAGA was about?" Blake shook his head. "No sir, I thought it'd be all flash, but now I see it's about community, about people like Tom." Nicholas nodded, his voice deep. "Good. I had nothing once, Blake, slept on the streets, penniless, but I learned worth isn't in looks or beliefs, it's in actions. You were wrong to disrespect Karoline, but you're making it right. I respect that." He paused, then added, "My company needs some new cars. If you keep changing, I'll let you handle that deal." Blake blinked, stunned. "You serious, Mr. Riccio?" Nicholas smirked. "I don't joke about business, but it's up to you." Karoline cut in. "The Azure's serving me well, delivered on time, no issues. But next time, don't let politics get in the way of your job, Blake." Blake nodded, his voice earnest. "I won't. Thank you, Miss Leavitt, and Mr. Riccio." The gala rolled on with laughter and music. Blake wheeled Tom back to the buffet, his demeanor noticeably softer. Karoline and Nicholas lingered, watching. "Think he's really changed?" she asked. Nicholas chuckled. "Maybe, but if not, I'll make him remember. You're the most important thing to me." She leaned into him, smiling. "I know." The story of Karoline Leavitt and Nicholas Riccio at Capital Luxury Motors deeply reflects the political and social polarization in the U.S. today, where personal beliefs often clash with community values. In the 2025 setting, Karoline, White House press secretary, was denied the Azure Coupe by Blake Thompson simply for being MAGA, a conservative symbol he despised. This incident echoes current realities, where private businesses like coffee shops or restaurants sometimes refuse service over political stances, sparking debates about free speech and private property rights. Blake represents a segment of progressive Americans who see themselves as superior, yet fall into the very intolerance they critique in others. Conversely, Karoline and Nicholas embody the resilience of conservatives, refusing to bow to bias and using action, the fiery red Rolls-Royce in the MAGA gala, to prove their worth. The lesson here isn't just don't judge a book by its cover, but a more specific call in today's America: learn to listen and respect rather than letting politics cloud judgment. Blake changed after working with veteran Tom at the gala, realizing human value transcends labels like MAGA or progressive. Nicholas didn't destroy Blake, but gave him a chance to make amends, like offering the car deal. You can too. When facing conflict, choose dialogue over confrontation, and let actions affirm your worth, like Karoline driving the Azure through DC. Remember, polarization doesn't define you, how you respond to it does. If you enjoyed the story of how Karoline and Nicholas taught Blake a lesson about respect beyond politics, hit subscribe, so you don't miss more inspiring tales like this. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video with another MAGA journey.